The Vethra research station floated in the cold darkness of space like a jewel among the stars. And Director Velasol stood at the observation deck watching the endless void with eyes made of living crystal that caught every flicker of distant light. She had spent 40 years building this place into a sanctuary of knowledge, a place where 3 peaceful species worked together to unlock the secrets of the ancient ones who had come before them. All the Solith were beings of crystal and beauty, their bodies grown from minerals and light over centuries of slow formation. And they valued patience and wisdom above all things in the universe. The Krellani were amphibious creatures with smooth blue skin and large dark eyes. Gentle scientists who preferred the company of water and quiet laboratories to the noise of galactic politics. The Chithari were insectoid beings with 4 arms and compound eyes. Master engineers who could build anything from nothing, and who found joy in creation rather than destruction. Together, these 3 species had formed the Veteran Science Collective. And for decades, they had lived in peace at the edge of known space, far from the wars and empires that troubled the rest of the galaxy. Velasol turned from the window as her aide Cristallos entered the observation deck with movements that betrayed fear and urgency. Director, our long-range sensors have detected a fleet approaching from the Dominion border, Cristallos said with a voice that rang like breaking glass. Velasol felt her crystalline heart grow cold because she knew what those words meant. And she had feared this day would come since the Dominion of Ereth had begun expanding their territory 5 years ago. The nerdy Dominion was everything the Veteran Collective was not. And their reptilian warriors had conquered 17 peaceful worlds in the last decade alone. They took what they wanted and enslaved those who survived their attacks. And their commander Sithrak was known across the galaxy as a monster who showed no mercy to the weak. How many ships? Velasol asked. 47 warships, Director, all bearing Dominion markings and weapon signatures. The number hit Velasol like a physical blow because the station had only 12 small defense drones and a shield generator that was designed to protect against asteroids. Rather than plasma cannons, she activated the station-wide communication system, and her voice echoed through every corridor and laboratory. All personnel. This is Director Velasol speaking with an urgent announcement that requires immediate attention from everyone aboard this station. A Dominion fleet is approaching our position and will arrive within 6 hours. So I am ordering all non-essential staff to evacuate immediately using the emergency transport pods. Scientists should secure their research and prepare for possible evacuation. And security teams should report to defensive positions throughout the station. The hours that followed were chaos as thousands of beings rushed to save their work and their lives. And Velasol watched the evacuation with a heavy heart, because she knew that most of them would not escape in time. The transport pods were small and slow, designed for emergencies that had never been supposed to happen. And the Dominion ships were fast and hungry for prey when Commander Sithrak's fleet arrived. It spread across the void like a swarm of metal predators, with weapons already charging and boarding pods ready to launch. Sithrak himself appeared on the station's communication screen, and his scaled face twisted into what passed for a smile among the Earth. Greetings, Director of the Vethra Station, he said, with a voice like grinding stones. I am Commander Sithrak of the Dominion of Ereth, and I come bearing a simple message for you and your people. Surrender your station, your research, and yourselves to the Dominion immediately, and we will allow most of you to live as servants of our empire. Resist, and we will tear your station apart piece by piece and drag your broken bodies back to our slave markets as a lesson to others. Velasol faced the screen with all the dignity her ancient, crystalline form could muster. This station is a place of peaceful research and scientific discovery, she replied. And we have no quarrel with the Dominion or any other power in this galaxy. We ask only to be left alone to continue our work for the benefit of all species." Sithrak laughed, and the sound was ugly and cruel. "Your peaceful intentions mean nothing to me, old crystal, because the Dominion does not negotiate with the weak. You have 1 hour to surrender, or we will begin our assault." The communication ended, and Velasol turned to face her council of advisors who had gathered in the command center during the exchange. "What can we do?" asked Kromora, the senior Krellini scientist, her voice trembling with fear. "Our shields will not hold against their weapons," added Chitkara, the Chithri chief engineer. Clicking her mandibles in distress, Velasol moved to a console that had not been activated in 30 years, and she brushed dust from its surface with crystalline fingers that shook slightly. "There is one option," she said quietly, "but it is a path that many of you will not approve of taking." "What option?" Crystallos asked. 30 years ago, during the Terran Exodus Wars, a ship full of human refugees came to this station seeking shelter from enemies who wanted them dead. We took them in when no other species would help them, and we fed them and healed them and hid them until the danger passed. Before they left, their captain gave me this beacon and told me that if we ever needed help, we should activate it and humanity would answer our call. The council fell silent, and Velasol could see the fear in their eyes because everyone in the galaxy knew about humanity. Humans came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there for more than a few minutes without protective equipment. They breathed oxygen, a gas that was poisonous to most life forms in the galaxy, and they drank water that contained enough bacteria to kill a Solith in hours. Their world had crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, violent weather, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and predators that could tear apart any other species in seconds. And yet humans had not only survived on this death world, they had thrived and conquered it, and eventually reached out to the stars. They were persistent predators who could chase prey for days without stopping, and their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill other beings instantly. The galactic community called them Deathworlders, and most civilized species avoided contact with them entirely because their very presence was terrifying. "You cannot be serious," Kromora whispered, "because calling the humans would be like inviting monsters into our home to fight other monsters. The humans are dangerous beyond measure." Chitkara agreed, "and no one knows what they might do if they come here." Velasol looked at the Dominion fleet through the observation window, watching as the ships moved into attack formation with weapons glowing hot and ready. "The Dominion will enslave us all," she said simply, "and they will destroy everything we have built over the last 40 years. The humans are indeed dangerous." But 30 years ago, I looked into the eyes of their captain, and I saw something that I did not expect to find. I saw honor, and I saw gratitude, and I saw a promise that they would never forget what we did for them. We saved their people when no one else would help, and now I believe they will save ours in return. She activated the beacon, and a signal burst into space at speeds faster than light, carrying a simple message to a frequency that made all civilized species nervous. The message was an ancient human distress code that meant only one thing: help us. We are dying, and somewhere across the vast darkness of space, something heard the call and began to wake. 42 light years away from Bethra Station, the United Earth Naval Command Carrier, Perseverance, hung in orbit around a moon that had no name, and Admiral Chen Wei-Lin was reviewing tactical reports in her quarters when the emergency signal came through. She was a woman of 60 years with silver hair cut short and a face marked by scars from battles that most humans preferred to forget. Her eyes were dark and sharp like the eyes of a hawk, and when she read the coordinates attached to the distress signal, those eyes grew hard with recognition. "Bethra Station," she said quietly to herself. And the name brought back memories from 30 years ago when she had been a young lieutenant on a refugee ship running from enemies who wanted her people dead. She remembered the crystalline beings who had opened their doors when everyone else had closed theirs. And she remembered the promise that Captain Rodriguez had made before they left. Computer, identify the source of this signal and confirm its authenticity, she commanded. Signal confirmed as authentic Terran emergency beacon Alpha 7. The computer responded. Registered to Vethra Research Station. Authorization code verified as genuine and not under duress. Admiral Chun stood from her chair and walked to the communication panel on her wall with steps that were calm and measured despite the storm building inside her chest. Bridge. This is Admiral Chun, she said. I want all senior officers in the war room in 15 minutes. And I want a full tactical assessment of our current fleet readiness. Also contact the 4th and 7th combined divisions and inform them that we may need immediate support for a rescue operation. Within the hour, the war room of the Perseverance was filled with officers who represented the finest military minds that humanity had to offer. Captain Sarah Okonkwo commanded the assault cruiser Vengeance, and her reputation for aggressive tactics had made her a legend among the fleet commander. James Park led the Marine Expeditionary Force, 4,000 soldiers trained to fight in any environment against any enemy. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka was the chief tactical officer, a genius at space combat who had never lost a battle simulation in her entire career. Admiral Chun stood before them with the distress signal displayed on the main screen behind her. 30 years ago, a ship full of human refugees was saved by the people of Vethra Station. She began. They took us in when the rest of the galaxy wanted us dead. And they asked for nothing in return, except the promise that we would remember their kindness. Now they are under attack by the Dominion of Irith, a fleet of 47 warships against a station with almost no defenses. I am not asking for volunteers, because this is not a volunteer mission. We are going to Vethra Station, and we are going to save those people. We are going to save those people. And we are going to make the Dominion regret the day they decided to threaten our friends. Captain Okonkwo smiled with teeth that seemed too sharp for her gentle face. Admiral, the Vengeance is ready to deploy within the hour, she said. And my crew is eager to show the Dominion what human weapons can do. The Marines are ready, Commander Park added. And we have been training for exactly this kind of operation for years. How soon can we reach Vethra Station? Admiral Chun asked her navigation officer. At maximum warp speed. We can arrive in approximately 18 hours, came the reply. Then we leave in 30 minutes, the Admiral commanded. And I want every ship in this fleet ready for combat the moment we drop out of warp. Back at Vethra Station, the situation had grown desperate beyond words, and Director Velasol watched her people die with tears of liquid crystal streaming down her face. Commander Sithrak had not waited for the surrender deadline to pass, and his forces had begun their assault after only 30 minutes of patience. The station shields had held for the first 2 hours, but then they had started to fail section by section, and Dominion boarding parties had breached the outer hull. The Chithri defenders fought bravely with weapons designed for maintenance rather than war, but they were cut down by Irith soldiers who had spent their entire lives training to kill. The Krellani tried to hide in the water recycling systems, but the Dominion hunters found them and dragged them out into the corridors where they suffocated in the dry. The Solace shattered like glass when the plasma bolts hit them, and their crystalline screams echoed through the station like breaking. Music Velasol had retreated to the Central Command Center, with the last of her council and a handful of survivors who had nowhere else to go. How long has it been since we sent the signal? She asked. Crystallos. 14 hours, her aide replied. And there has been no response from the humans. Perhaps they did not receive the message, Krelmora said weakly, her blue skin pale from blood loss and her eyes dim with fading hope. Or perhaps they received it and chose not to come, Chitkara added bitterly. Because why would the Deathworlders care about people like us? Velasol said nothing because she had no words of comfort left to give. And she wondered if her gamble had been madness after all. The door to the command center shook as something heavy slammed against it from the other side. And everyone knew that the Dominion had finally found them. Open this door. Commander Sithrak's voice boomed through the metal. And perhaps I will make your deaths quick instead of slow. Velasol looked at her people. The last survivors of a dream that had lasted 40 years. And she felt shame that she had not been able to save them then. The station sensors made a sound that no one had expected to hear. And a young Chithari technician looked up from his console with compound eyes wide with shock. Director, he said, with a voice that trembled like leaves in wind. I am detecting multiple warp signatures approaching at impossible speed. How many signatures? Vilasol asked. 12 ships, the technician replied. And they are not Dominion vessels. Their identification codes are registering as United. Earth Naval Command. The command center fell silent as the meaning of those words sank into every mind present. The humans. Kristalos whispered, the humans are coming. Outside the station. Commander Sithrak received the same sensor data from his flagship. And he paused in his assault to consider this new development. 12 ships against his 47 seemed like poor odds for whoever was coming. And he was curious to see what kind of fools would challenge the Dominion with such a small force. He had heard stories about the Deathworlders, of course, but he had never faced them in battle, and he assumed that the stories were exaggerated nonsense spread by cowards. Let them come, he said to his officers, because we will destroy their little fleet, and then we will finish taking this station. By tomorrow, we will have new slaves and new trophies to present to the High Command. His officers laughed and agreed because they had never lost a battle. And they saw no reason why this one would be any different, but deep in space. 12 points of light were tearing through the fabric of reality at speeds that should have been impossible. And aboard the lead ship, Admiral Chen Wei-Lin was putting on her combat armor with hands that were steady and calm. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we are receiving updated intelligence from long-range probes. The Dominion has breached the station and is conducting boarding operations as we speak. Estimated civilian casualties are already in the thousands. Admiral Chun sealed her helmet and looked at her. Reflection in the dark visor with eyes that held no mercy and no hesitation. Then, we will not waste time with warnings, she said. Quietly, when we arrive, we open fire immediately, and we do not stop until every Dominion ship is burning. They wanted to pick a fight with our friends. Now they will learn what happens when you make enemies of humanity. The 12 human ships dropped out of warp in perfect formation, like wolves descending upon unsuspecting prey. And the Perseverance led the pack with weapons already glowing hot and hungry for targets. There were no hails. No demands for surrender. No warnings of any kind because Admiral Chun had given her orders, and those orders were simple beyond misunderstanding. Destroy the enemy and save the station. Commander Sithrak barely had time to register the arrival of the human fleet before the first volley of fire slammed into his outer defense line with force that made his flagship shake. 3 Dominion frigates vanished in balls of fire and metal within the first 10 seconds of the engagement. And Sithrak stared at his tactical display with eyes wide in disbelief. What kind of weapons are those? He demanded of his officers, but none of them had answers because they had never seen anything like this before. Human weapons were different from anything else in the galaxy. Forged by a species that had evolved on a world where survival meant constant innovation and adaptation. Their plasma cannons burned hotter than Dominion shields were designed to handle. and their kinetic rounds punched through armor plating like needles through cloth. The targeting systems were linked to human reflexes that processed information faster than any Erath could comprehend. And the result was a level of accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. Captain Okonkwo's vengeance cut through the Dominion formation like a blade through water, leaving burning wreckage in her wake. Her ship twisted and rolled between enemy fire with movements that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. But human pilots were trained from childhood in simulators that would have killed any other species. They could handle gravitational forces that would crush Erath bones to powder. And they could make decisions in fractions of seconds that Dominion commanders needed minutes to process. All ships focus fire on their command vessels, Admiral Chun ordered calmly, her voice steady despite the chaos exploding across her view screen. Disable their coordination, and they will fall apart like leaves in a storm. The human fleet moved as one, shifting targets with precision that spoke of years of training in combat. Experienced Dominion cruisers tried to form defensive formations, but the humans broke through every line and exploited every weakness with merciless efficiency. Inside Vethra Station, Director Velasol watched the battle through sensors that could barely keep up with the speed of the engagement. "They are winning," Cristallo said with amazement in his crystalline voice. 12 ships against 47, and they are actually winning. Not winning, Velasol corrected quietly. Hunting. She was right. Because what was happening outside was not a battle in any traditional sense of the word. It was a predator, demonstrating to prey exactly how helpless they truly were. The humans did not fight like any species the Dominion had ever encountered, because they did not fight to defeat their enemies. They fought to destroy them utterly and completely. Commander Sithrak screamed orders at his officers as another wave of fire tore through his fleet. But his commands were meaningless against an enemy that moved too fast to predict. "Launch all boarding pods," he commanded desperately. "If we can take their ships from the inside, we can still win this fight." It was a reasonable tactic against most enemies, because the Erath were strong and brutal in close combat. And their soldiers had conquered 17 worlds through exactly this kind of warfare, but Commander Sithrak had never faced human marines before. The boarding pods slammed into the hull of the Perseverance, and Dominion warriors poured into the corridors with weapons raised and battle cries echoing off the metal walls. They expected to find soft creatures cowering before their superior strength. Instead, they found Commander James Park and his Marines waiting for them with weapons that looked like they had been designed by demons. The first wave of Erath soldiers died before they even understood what was happening. Cut down by weapons fire so intense that their bodies were torn apart in mid-earth. Survivors tried to press forward because Erath warriors did not retreat. But the humans met them with a savagery that made the Dominion look gentle. By comparison, human soldiers were persistent predators, beings whose ancestors had hunted prey across endless plains until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They did not tire. They did not slow down. And they absolutely did not give up. Commander Park led his Marines through the boarding party like a force of nature, his powered armor deflecting Erath weapons, while his own rifle spat death with every pull of the trigger. A Dominion warrior managed to land a blow on one of the Marines, a strike that would have killed any civilized species instantly. But the human simply staggered and then kept fighting. His armor had cracked and his arm was clearly broken. But he switched his weapon to his other hand and continued the assault without hesitation. "What are you?" The Erath warrior screamed before a rifle round ended his question forever. Outside the ship, the battle was turning into a massacre as the human fleet systematically dismantled. The Dominion force Sithrak watched in horror as his proud fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. And for the first time in his 40 years of conquest, he felt genuine fear. All ships retreat, he ordered, his voice barely a whisper. Fall back to the edge of the system and regroup. It was the first tactical retreat he had ever ordered, and the shame of it burned hotter than the plasma fires consuming his fleet. The surviving Dominion ships fled with the humans in pursuit, and only the admiral's order to protect the station kept them from being hunted down to the last vessel. Let them run, Admiral Chun said as she watched the enemy scatter like frightened animals. We need to secure the station and rescue any survivors. They will call for reinforcements, Captain Okonkwo warned. And next time they will bring more ships. Good, the Admiral replied with a smile that held no warmth. Let them bring every ship they have. We called for reinforcements too. The first wave of Marines reached Vethra Station within minutes, breaching the Dominion boarding parties from behind and catching them between human soldiers and desperate civilian defenders, the Irith warriors, who had terrorized the station for hours, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that was faster, stronger, and far more brutal than anything they had ever encountered. They died in corridors filled with the crystalline bodies of Soloth victims, and the humans made sure that every death was painful and slow. Director Velasol emerged from the command center to find Commander Park standing over the bodies of Dominion soldiers, his armor covered in blood that was not his own. Director Velasol, he said with a voice that was surprisingly gentle, despite the violence that surrounded him. Admiral Chun sends her regards and asks me to inform you that humanity always pays its debts. Velasol looked at the human marine with his broken armor and his blood-stained weapons, and she saw something that she had not expected. She saw a protector, a guardian, a monster who had chosen to defend the weak instead of prey upon them. Thank you, she said simply, and the words carried the weight of everything that she could not express. Do not thank us yet, Commander Park replied, because this is only the beginning. The Dominion will return with more ships, and when they do, we will be ready for them. Today, we taught them a lesson about picking fights with the wrong people. Tomorrow we will teach them what it means to make enemies of humanity. Commander Sithrak paced the bridge of his flagship with rage burning in his reptilian eyes, and his officers kept their distance because they had seen what happened to those who approached him in such a mood. Had lost 18 ships in less than an hour, and the shame of his retreat would follow him for the rest of his career unless he found a way to turn this disaster into victory. Open the channel to Dominion High. Command, he ordered through teeth that were clenched so tight they threatened to crack. The communication array hummed to life, and the face of Grand Admiral Vrex appeared on the main screen with scales that were silver with age and eyes that held no patience for failure. Commander Sithrak, I have received reports of your engagement at Vethra Station, the Grand Admiral said with a voice like grinding metal. Explain to me how you lost 18 warships to a force 1/4 the size of your own. Sithrak swallowed his pride and bowed his head in shame that burned like acid in his throat. Grand Admiral, the humans are unlike any enemy we have ever faced, he said carefully. Their weapons are more powerful than our intelligence suggested, and their tactics are beyond anything in our battle records. I am requesting immediate reinforcements to complete the subjugation of Vethra Station and to eliminate the human threat before they can establish a permanent presence in this sector. Grand Admiral Vrex studied Sithrak for a long moment with eyes that weighed his words against his failures. The High Command has already dispatched 50 additional warships to your position, he said finally. They will arrive within 8 hours. When they arrive, you will have 97 vessels at your command, and you will use them to crush these Deathworlders and take that station. Do not fail again, Commander, because there will be no third chance. The communication ended, and Sithrak felt hope returning to his cold blood, because 97 ships was a force that could conquer small empires. The humans had only 12 vessels, and even Deathworlders could not defy such overwhelming odds. He began planning his revenge with careful attention to every detail, positioning his remaining ships at the edge of the system while he waited for the reinforcements that would give him victory. Back at Vethra Station, Admiral Chun received intelligence reports that made her smile in a way that would have terrified anyone who saw it. The Dominion has called for reinforcements. Her communications officer reported, "Our long-range sensors detect 50 additional warships approaching from Dominion space. They will arrive in approximately 8 hours." Captain Okonkwo frowned at the numbers on her tactical display. "Admiral, 97 ships against our 12 is a significant disadvantage," she said with concern in her voice. "Even for us, who said we only have 12 ships?" Admiral Chun replied calmly. She turned to her communications officer with eyes that sparkled with something that might have been amusement. "Open a channel to United Earth Naval Command and inform them that we are requesting immediate reinforcements for Operation Vethra. Authorization code Chun Alpha 77. Priority absolute." The officer's eyes widened because that authorization code was reserved for situations that threatened the survival of human interests in an entire sector. "Admiral, that code will mobilize every available fleet within response range," she said carefully. "Yes," Admiral Chun agreed. "It will." The hours that followed were tense for everyone at Vethra Station as they watched the Dominion fleet grow larger on their sensors and wondered if even the humans could save them from what was coming. Director Velasol worked alongside human engineers to repair critical systems, and she marveled at the way they approached problems with creative solutions that her own people would never have considered. Commander Park's Marines patrolled the corridors with weapons ready, and their presence made the surviving veterans feel safe for the first time since the siege began. But beneath the surface, everyone was counting ships and calculating odds that did not favor their survival. Then the reinforcements arrived, and everything changed. The first warp signatures appeared on sensors exactly 6 hours after Admiral Chun sent her request, and the communications officer reported them with a voice that trembled with emotion. "Admiral, I am detecting 32 ships dropping out of warp," she said. "Identification codes confirm 4th and 7th Combined Divisions." Captain Okonkwo smiled because 44 ships against 97 was much better odds than 12 against 97. But the warp signatures did not stop appearing. "Admiral, additional contacts," the officer continued with growing excitement. "The Martian Colonial Defense Force is arriving with 18 vessels. Earth Orbital Command is deploying 12 more ships from the home defense fleet. I am also detecting the carrier group from Proxima Station with 23 ships." Director Velasol watched the human sensor displays with crystalline eyes that could not believe what they were seeing. More and more ships kept arriving, tearing through space at speeds that defied everything she knew about physics, each one bearing the marks of United Earth Naval Command. 44 ships, Crystallos counted beside her. 62 ships, 80 ships, 90 ships. How many ships do the humans have? Kralmora asked in a voice barely louder than a whisper. 107. Admiral Chung replied as she walked onto the station's command deck. "And 3 more carrier groups will arrive within the next 2 hours." She stood beside Director Velasol and looked out at the field of stars that was now filled with human warships. "When the Dominion calls for reinforcements, they summon soldiers to fight a battle," the Admiral said quietly. "When humanity calls for reinforcements, we summon enough force to end the war." Commander Sithrak received the sensor reports from his scouts, and for the first time in his life, he understood what true fear felt like. 50 reinforcement ships had arrived from Dominion space, giving him a fleet of 97 warships that should have been unstoppable. The humans had answered his escalation with an escalation of their own, And now he faced a force that outnumbered his own and outgunned it by a margin that made victory impossible. 119 ships. His tactical officer reported with a voice that cracked with terror. Including 4 Leviathan-class siege platforms. Sithrak knew what Leviathan-class platforms were designed to do. And the knowledge made his scales turn pale with horror. Those ships were not built for space combat against other vessels. They were built to crack open planets and render entire worlds uninhabitable. The humans had brought weapons designed for extinction, and they had brought them for a single research station. Grand Admiral Vrex must be informed, Sithrak said weakly. We need more ships, but even as he gave the order, he knew that it was pointless, because the Dominion did not have enough ships to match what humanity had deployed. Every vessel they sent would be met with 2 or 3 or 5 human ships in response. And the mathematics of that escalation led to only one conclusion: the humans were not fighting to defend Vethra Station, they were fighting to make an example that the entire galaxy would remember. And Commander Sithrak realized with cold certainty that he and his fleet were going to be that example. Director Velasol looked at Admiral Chun with new understanding in her ancient crystalline eyes. You knew they would call for reinforcements, she said slowly. And you wanted them to. Yes, Admiral Chun admitted without shame. Because we needed the Dominion to commit enough forces to make our response meaningful. Destroying 18 ships was a victory. But destroying 97 ships is a message. A message that will echo across every empire and every power in this galaxy. A message that says never touch what humanity protects. The final human reinforcements arrived, bringing the fleet to 119 vessels against the Dominion's 97. And Commander Sithrak watched his doom take shape with eyes that had finally learned what it meant to be prey instead of predator. The Battle of Vethra began at dawn by station time. Though in the endless void of space, there was no true sunrise to mark the moment when 119 human warships moved against 97 Dominion vessels. Admiral Chun gave no speeches and made no declarations because there was nothing left to say that had not already been communicated. Through the simple act of bringing overwhelming force to answer a threat against humanity's friends, all ships. Engage at will, she commanded, and her fleet surged forward like a tide of steel and fire. Commander Sithrak had positioned his forces in a defensive formation, hoping that concentrated firepower might compensate for the numerical disadvantage that he now faced. It was a reasonable tactic that might have worked against any other enemy. But the humans did not fight the way other species fought. They did not line up their ships and exchange volleys at long range like civilized beings conducting honorable warfare. Instead, they charged directly into the Dominion formation with reckless aggression that seemed like madness until it proved to be genius. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Dominion possessed, and they used that advantage to tear apart Sithrak's defensive lines before his gunners could even acquire proper targeting solutions. Captain Okonkwo's vengeance led a squadron of assault cruisers straight through the center of the Dominion fleet, and her weapons tore through enemy ships with the precision of a surgeon, removing diseased tissue. The Leviathan-class platforms held back from the main engagement, their massive weapons trained on the battlefield like executioners. Waiting for their moment, they did not need to fire because the regular fleet was more than enough to handle the Dominion forces, but their presence sent a message that could not be ignored. The humans had brought weapons capable of destroying worlds, and they had brought them to defend a single station full of peaceful scientists. If this was how they responded to a threat against their friends, what would they do to those who actually harmed them? Commander Sithrak watched his fleet die around him, and he felt something break inside his warrior's heart. Had spent 40 years conquering the weak and enslaving the helpless. And he had believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe, but now he understood that there were different kinds of strength. And the humans possessed a kind that he had never imagined. They fought with a fury that went beyond tactics and strategy. A rage that burned like nuclear fire in every shot and every maneuver. They were not fighting for territory or resources or slaves. They were fighting because someone had threatened people they cared about. And that simple fact made them more dangerous than any professional military force in the galaxy. All ships, surrender. Sithrak ordered finally, his voice hollow with defeat. Lower weapons and transmit surrender codes on all frequencies. But his order came too late. And Admiral Chun had no intention of accepting it. Continue the engagement, she commanded her fleet. No prisoners, no survivors. Captain Okonkwo turned to her with surprise in her eyes. Admiral, they are surrendering, she said carefully. By the laws of war, we are required to. The Dominion murdered thousands of innocent civilians on that station. Admiral Chun interrupted with ice in her voice. Including children who were too young to understand why monsters were killing their families. There will be no surrender, and there will be no mercy. Today, the galaxy learns what happens when you make enemies of humanity. The battle became a slaughter as the human fleet hunted down every Dominion ship with relentless determination. Vessels that tried to flee were chased down and destroyed. And vessels that tried to fight were overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. Commander Sithrak's flagship, the Conqueror's Pride, was boarded by Marines who fought their way to the bridge through corridors choked with Dominion dead. Admiral Chun herself led the final assault. Her power armor scratched and dented, but still functional. A rifle hot from continuous fire, she found Sithrak in his command chamber, surrounded by the bodies of his personal guard, who had died trying to protect their leader from the monsters they had awakened. The commander stood alone with his weapon raised. But his hands were shaking, and his eyes held the terror of prey that had finally been cornered. You came for scientists, Admiral Chun said as she stepped over the bodies of his guards. Peaceful researchers who wanted nothing more than to study the stars and unlock the secrets of the universe. They saved human lives 30 years ago, and they asked for nothing in return except to be left alone. And you killed them. Sithrak tried to speak, tried to justify his actions or beg for mercy, but the words would not come because there was nothing he could say that would matter. They were weak. He finally managed to whisper. They deserved. They were ours, Admiral Chung interrupted. And those two words carried more weight than all the weapons in her fleet. She raised her rifle and ended the conversation with a single shot that echoed through the ship like a final judgment in the aftermath of the battle. Not a single Dominion vessel remained intact, and the debris field stretched across millions of kilometers of space like a monument to the cost of threatening humanity's friends. The human fleet turned its attention to Vethra Station, and the warships that had brought death to their enemies now brought hope to their allies. Engineers arrived to repair the damage that the Dominion had caused, working alongside Solith and Krelenai and Chithari, who had survived the siege. Medical teams treated the wounded with technologies that seemed like miracles to species who had never seen human medicine in action. Admiral Chun walked through the rebuilt corridors of the station until she found Director Velasol in the observation deck where everything had begun. The crystalline director stood before the window, watching human ships patrol the space that had so recently been filled with enemies. You remembered, Velasol said softly without turning around. After 30 years. You remembered a debt that we never asked you to repay. Admiral Chun stood beside her and looked out at the stars. Humanity has a long memory, she replied. We remember those who helped us when we were weak, and we remember those who hurt us when we were strong. The Dominion will not forget what happened here, Velasol said, and they will want revenge. Let them want, Admiral Chun said with a shrug. because we will be here waiting for them. Vethra Station is under the protection of United Earth Naval Command now, and anyone who threatens this place will face the same fate as Commander Sithrak. Velasol turned to look at the human admiral with eyes that had seen 40 years of peace shattered in a single day. Why? She asked simply, why would you risk so much for us? Admiral Chun considered the question for a long moment before answering. Because you show kindness to people who had nothing, she said finally. And in this galaxy full of predators and monsters, that kindness is the rarest treasure of all. Humanity protects what we value. And we value those who helped us when no one else would. Today we paid our debt. But tomorrow we will still be here because you are our friends now. And humans never abandon their friends. Word of the Battle of Vethra spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by traders and diplomats and spies who understood the significance of what had happened. The Dominion's expansion halted as their leaders realized that the cost of continuing might be the complete destruction of their empire. Other predatory civilizations grew cautious, reconsidering their plans in light of the human response to a single threatened research station, and a new phrase entered the vocabulary of 1,000 different species. A warning that was whispered in corridors of power across the known universe: never touch what the Deathworlders protect in the rebuilt council chamber of Vethra Station. A young Solith child sat beside her teacher and asked the question that children always ask when they witness events they do not understand. Teacher, why did the humans come so far to save us? The teacher looked out the window at the human ships that still patrolled their space. Guardians who asked for nothing in return for their protection. Because, little one, she answered gently, sometimes the most dangerous monsters in the universe are also the most loyal friends. And we are very lucky that they chose to be our friends. The child nodded and watched the human ships dance among the stars. And she wondered what other wonders the universe might hold for a species that had earned the protection of Deathworlders somewhere in the endless void. A message broadcast on all frequencies served as humanity's final word on the matter too. All civilizations considering aggression against protected species. Humanity does not send warnings. Humanity sends fleets. Choose your enemies wisely.